Good evening. We're ready to start. So it's 7:30, all right? Elliot, set your watch.
7:38.
Welcome to the Candidates Night for Sherborn. It's the first one we've had in several years. As you know, the Candidates Night is an opportunity for the candidates that have been selected at the caucus or those that have filed to run for offices to meet with the residents, answer some questions that we've put together, answer questions from the audience, and explain to us a little bit what they intend to do in the office that they're going to be occupying after the general elections in May. So here we are. We have to recognize that these candidates are volunteering their time. They're donating their time actually after their work and family, so we have to respect their contributions to the town. It's a valuable skill set that we all rely on. Many of us have served in these capacities over the years. This evening, we have Mary Greendale, who is going to be our moderator. Mary is from Holliston. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, Mary reminded me that we were all one town together when it was called Bogastow, I guess. But I've known Mary for several years, but she's a native of Springfield, Massachusetts. She's an alumnus of Syracuse University. It's too bad, Mary, they didn't go to the NCAA Final Four, but that's okay. She's served in Holliston as a member of the Board of Selectmen. She's very active in town. She runs a TV show that basically is the talk of the town, so everyone is able to keep up to date on what the current events are, what's going on. I met Mary first several years ago when we were both on the board of the Mary Ann Morse nursing home rehabilitation center over in Natick and in Framingham, and we worked together very closely for several years. So we spent some time with Mary after she agreed to serve as our moderator. Mary did prepare. She spent a lot of time looking through the Collins report, the DOR report, spending time with Grace Shepard and myself, going through questions, trying to make sure that we had a good balance of time spent, good questions to ask of the various candidates. And so she has put quite a bit of time in preparing for this evening. We're also going to ask questions to come from the audience. So we have three screeners over there to make sure the questions are properly phrased, and they'll then pass them on to Mary. We have Kitty Sturgis over there in the door, and Kitty has the cards and pencils for those in the audience that wish to submit a question. Give it to Kitty. She'll get it over to Doug Brody, who is a screener, and George Honeywell, also the third screener. So the questions will be passed from Kitty over to the screeners. They will assemble them and then pass them on to Mary. There may be more questions than we have time to answer, so don't be disappointed if your question does not get answered, get asked, okay? Now, tonight we've got an agenda. There were 19 people that were nominated at caucus. One contested office, the Board of Health, and so we will have Rebecca Honeywell and Peter Liffington up here. First, we will have the three new members of the Board of Selectmen, since there's no contest, so we will have them up here first. We have 6 people who are new in offices here in Sherborn. So we will not hear from all the candidates, but We will have most of them. I see Poe Putnam's in the audience here. He's going to be up here also spending time with Mary, getting some information over to the voters. So what I'd like to do is to go right into the program and turn it over to Mary and ask the Board of Selectmen candidates to come up here first and start the process.
Thank you. Thanks, Frank. Thank you all for allowing me to be the moderator tonight. I don't get to talk about politics outside of Holliston very often, so this is fun. I don't have to worry what happens here. I can leave it all behind, and you all get to deal with it. And I'll go home to deal with our stuff, which is not a lot different from what you're dealing with. So at any rate, so we have before us the three gentlemen who are your newest selectmen by virtue of being ordained almost into these offices with no competition. So that's a good thing. For my purposes, could you please introduce yourselves to me? I think I know which is which, but okay.
Hi, I'm Chuck Yon.
Hi, Chuck.
Sean Killeen.
Hi, Sean.
Mark Brandon.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to, we obviously have a limited amount of time. I would ask all the candidates, whether they're the ones at the table now or in the future, to try to be succinct and to try not to repeat yourself. If you said it, just hope and pray everybody heard what you said and try to move on. If you have, I'd like this to be relatively informal. Clearly, you're not going to jump in each other's faces with comments or questions, but let's keep it as relaxed and informal as we possibly can. And I may, at some point, ask you for a follow-up question as a clarification or something else, if I don't understand something that you've said, and I'll assume that perhaps somebody else in the audience doesn't understand either. So, all right. For this first question, then, I'm just going to start with Chuck and move down. Then I'll alternate. I'll move down to Sean and let him start the next one. But at any rate, for this question, you are running for the first time, and because you are unopposed, you will be a selectman come May. Congratulations. What was it that made you decide to run for this office, and what do you see as your most positive asset that you bring to the new position? Chuck?
I decided to run for selectman because I have great belief that all of us, the town runs on the back and sweat and skills of volunteers, and that we all need to volunteer our times and energies to the town. I've served on a number of boards in town, the planning board, recycling committee, the Sherborn Governance Task Force, a couple of committees at St. Teresa's, and I firmly believe that the selectmen need to be a strategic board, less operational, and that I think is one of the skill sets that I come with. In business, I work with a lot of different companies working on business development and strategy, and look forward to serving on the board. I think the current board has done a very good job. You look around the room, you see lots of people that you've served with on boards who have been selectmen in the past, and I just think it's all incumbent upon all of us to volunteer our services to the town.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
Well, I grew up in town, as many people in this room know. So for many years, I've felt like I'd like to. This became a great opportunity to do it. And I feel like I have the knowledge and the ability, probably with all that past experience and the understanding of the dynamics of many of the issues that the town has had for generations, many of which we're going to talk about in the next few questions.
Okay. And Mark?
Well, Stacy and I have lived in town for about 20 years now, and I thought it would be interesting. I spent 6 years on advisory, and actually, everybody says that it's the most thankless job in the world, but I can't tell you how many people have come up and said thank you for doing that job. And took a couple of years off, and decided, like Chuck, that I would also like to contribute again. Worked on very hard on the financial side of the business, of the town, and I'd like the opportunity now to sort of work on the other side of it as well.
Thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you as a clarification with your last statement, what do you mean by the other side of it?
Well, we're going to talk about this in a little more detail, but when I went on advisory, it was pretty clear that we were going to head into a tough patch. We were spending quite a bit of money drawing down our reserves, and we managed, a lot of people working together managed to get ourselves out of that situation. And I now think that we now need to sort of turn our attention. We can't give up being vigilant about our finances, but I think we need to turn our attention to, what is the attractiveness of Sherborn, what's the livability of Sherborn, and things like that. And that's the piece that I would like to work on.
Okay, can I call that vision for my purposes, just for my own notes here?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so that leads very nicely into the second question. And thank you for being succinct, gentlemen, all of you. What do you see as the town's top 2 greatest challenges? Why? And how would you approach them? And please be please be specific, but again, we'll ask you to be succinct, because I know this is the kind of place where you can have lots of thoughts. So this time we'll start in the middle. Sean?
My top 2 of many. The first, I think, is the flat, or at least the slow climb in real estate assessments, which are obviously hampering our tax income. And I think it's probably a little bit too slow to sustain. We're probably going to touch on that when Mark talks a little bit more about the future in the next few questions. And I think hand in hand with that is our long, medium, and short-term planning, which is nearly non-existent. Again, that touches on some of the later questions, downtown, facilities management. I don't want to get into all those things, but
Well, this question is an opportunity to talk about why you picked those and also how you would approach them. So I think it probably would make sense to start to unfold a little bit of that.
well, I think that the lack of planning, especially on facilities management, which again gets into the Collins report, causes us to be reactionary, and also a key phrase from that is the penny wise and pound foolish, which is somewhat the method that this town tends to operate on. And lack of planning causes us to oftentimes repeat the same mistakes over and over again.
Okay. Is there one specific example of something, I mean, all right, the penny wise and pound foolish can, be a pretty wide brush.
A specific example, I've been on 3 different capital projects, which I jumped in the middle of, all 3 of which were going for a second round of an ask at consecutive town meetings because they were underfunded.
Okay.
And a town that negotiates itself out of good projects constantly has few successful good projects.
Okay. I think that's succinct enough for a video. All right, Mark.
Well, I think, Sean touched on it when he talked about the value of the real estate. A lot of people have started to pay attention to our tax rate now that it's approached 20 and sort of a psychological barrier. And I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that we've worked hard on the one side of the equation, but now we really have to look at the other side of the equation. And when we think strategically about the town, we've invested heavily in our education system. We've got a great education system here. We've got a wonderful environment in terms of the landscape and the housing stock that we have here. But how well is the town really meeting the needs of its residents, and maybe even more importantly, the needs of the people that are going to, that we hope are going to move here? And so, I think our 2 top challenges are continue to keep our spending down and to manage it very carefully, and then to look for really smart ideas about how we can make Sherborn a more attractive place. I've been involved with the Built Environment Committee that's reviewing the general plan, and have been really impressed by some of the very creative ideas that have come up that some people have suggested that wouldn't cost a lot of money. Might need a little change in thinking, but could certainly be implemented and could make a big difference in the town.
Could I press you for an example?
example?
Please, because, yeah.
Yeah, You know, I think if you were, imagine that you're a, late 20s, early 30s young woman, and you're bicycling out to Sherborn. And we know that these people come here because we see them all the time. And the reason they come here is because it's a beautiful place, and they like to bicycle through here. But you come here, and, you get off your bicycle, and the first thing you want to do is answer a call to nature. Well, you can't really do that. And then, if that's not an issue, you might want to stop and have a cup of coffee or a beer with your friends or something like that, and you can't really do that either. And maybe there's a way that we could, what's the conclusion you're going to come to? Is this a friendly place? Is this some place that really wants me to come move here and have children and raise them up? Could we become more welcoming?
Okay, remind me at the end of this to talk to you all about America in Bloom. Seriously. Okay. Chuck?
Well, I think Sean and Mark have touched on both of these issues. We're all attracted to Sherborn because it's the open space and it's so green and the great school system. But I think we also recognize that there's a serious problem with the tax base. It is just hard to maintain a very good but expensive school system. And so when we moved to town, Libby and I were struck that there were a number of town buildings that simply had not been maintained for a while. And I think part of our debt is based on redoing a lot of that infrastructure. But I think that continues to be an issue. Mark and I have chatted about this, making the town more attractive to people to move into town, I think is very important. In terms of a concrete example, I thought that the Abbey Road project that the planning board had approved was just the example of expanding the tax base in a very well thought out and very well planned way. Its proximity to the town center. It's a great location for over 55, and I thought that was a very smart plan that got approved by the town boards and got approved overwhelmingly at town meetings. So I think it's that type of smart growth that's important. Because there are other projects, the Pulte project on Maple Street was another one that it met the criteria to get to town meeting, but there wasn't a lot of support for it, and that wasn't surprising. It was a very different plan. So in terms of specifics, I think we need to be creative about ways to expand the tax base and to spend our money wisely. The other issue that I'm really concerned about is both Collins' report and DOR emphasized the need for strategic planning and thinking, and the Board of Selectmen should be leading the way. I'll save my comments about town plans for downtown because it's really fascinating when you look back at the 75 plan, the 1985 plan.
Listing can relate.
Might have struck a chord in this room.
A lot of really interesting ideas that have been kicking around for a long time.
Okay, that's great. Can I assume that everybody here knows about the Abbey Road plan and so forth? We don't need to probe at that? Okay. I do want to ask about strategic plans. Now, you have said that, strategic was important. Do all of you feel that the Board of Selectmen are responsible for strategic planning? Or do you believe that it belongs in the planning board? And it's a sidebar question. John?
I think it needs to either start or be championed by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
I think it's the board that's on TV nearly every week. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, they get more TV time. People see it more. People don't necessarily, this isn't a shot at the planning board, but there isn't a whole lot of people paying attention to everything the planning board's doing. So it's hard for them to sell something that might be that important, especially to different age groups.
Okay. Mark?
Well, I think without question, the Board of Selectmen has to create the environment where this kind of planning can take place. But as Chuck points out, we've done plenty of strategic planning, and we're going through another round of it now. So I think, like many things in life, the planning's a lot easier than the actual doing. And so I think our challenge is more to create an environment where good ideas can percolate up and can actually be acted upon and discussed in a way that we can reach some reasonable compromise.
Okay. Don't forget, you folks have the opportunity to send questions in if something comes to mind. As you see it, please describe the role of the Board of Selectmen in the relationship with the town administrator. Mark, it's your turn to start.
Well, for me personally, I don't have a lot of interest in becoming involved in the day-to-day running of the town. I don't think that's really what people are looking for us to do. If you've been a CEO or involved on a board, the best boards are there really to act as a sounding board, to give overall direction. And then, hopefully you've got people with different skills and different experiences who can reach out and find resources when you run into a problem that maybe you haven't dealt with before. And so, I would see the Board of Selectmen, my hope would be that we would take much more of an executive approach to, I shouldn't say more than, but I think the past board is doing a good job of this. But to take an executive approach to dealing with the town administrator and giving him as much responsibility as he can take on. I happen to think we have a good individual here as our town administrator, and we want to keep him engaged and happy.
Okay. Chuck, you would be next.
When I was still serving on the Governance Task Force Committee, we spent a lot of time talking to former town administrators and to current town administrators, Paul LeBeau and in Holliston, for example, and it was really struck at there was a perception, fair or not, that the Board of Selectmen in the past have been very involved in nitty-gritty, day-to-day operational things. So I think that the board stepping back, hiring, finding the best people, attracting them, and retaining them is important. One of the other things that the Governance Task Force recommended was expanding the board from 3 to 5 members for a variety of reasons, but I'm also concerned about not the board being respectful of Dave's time, David Williams, the town administrator's time, because if we're all 5 of us asking him to research projects, we can overwhelm him from doing his important day-to-day work. But it was really interesting. The towns of Dover and Holliston, their bylaws really don't have much detail at all about what the town administrator does. They're just de facto very strong. We tried to implement a number of the recommendations of the DOR report to strengthen the town administrator, and I think we need to be respectful of that and try to follow through on that so that the board can be strategic, not operational.
Okay. Sean?
So not to sound contrary to what either of them said, one aspect of what the town administrator does is long-term planning. So while the day-to-day operations really shouldn't be meddled with by the selectmen, there's a lot that the selectmen should be doing, and I see gains in having 5 selectmen, because even just the 3 of us sitting here, there's a pretty wide range of skill sets that we can help assist the town administrator in achieving some of those mid and long-term goals. Either not in committees, but with some of the committees that are researching certain stuff or projects that the town administrator is working on. Certainly my skill set in buildings and engineering can be an asset to the town administrator, not to undermine what he's doing, but to assist him and help him in the facilities management and everything else that we're working on. It's a pretty big project that you can't just dump on the town administrator. You can certainly help him gain the resources to achieve the goals.
Okay, I'm going to push back a little bit. Personal experience and umpty-ump years of working in state government and working with local municipalities. I just want to clarify, in a situation in which you are working with the town administrator on a particular project, and it doesn't matter which one of you this would relate to, How do you address the role of who's in charge? I'm not trying to play stump the stars, but the fact of the matter is you are always his boss, or her boss, in the case that sometime you may have a female there. You're always the boss. So how do you make sure that this person sees this as either a peer relationship or an authority relationship or whatever? For all of you, I think this is an important thing that you need to flesh out a little bit, maybe? Just a bit.
Well,
Go, Mark.
I'll start. I guess it never really occurred to me that the town administrator doesn't report to the Board of Selectmen. And I think that, the best way to manage that relationship is to have some pretty clear goals that are defined and written down and tracked. For example, I think we need to develop a report card on how we're doing on some of the things that were laid out in the DOR and the Collins report. There's a lot of detail in there. There's a lot of, there's sort of some grand strategic things that we want to do, but then there's some real focused process items that need doing too. And I think we need to keep chipping away at those things. And I think in many ways it's incumbent on him to get that done. And on us to hold him accountable for doing that.
Do either of you have anything to add to that, or just agree?
I just think that the board needs to recognize that if each individual member is making huge demands on the town administrator, his or her time, you need to be careful. Probably not that different than the expense of hiring, using town council. It can be an
Right.
expensive process, and it probably should be more important things. Does it require a roll call vote? I don't know. I think hopefully it works by consensus and people recognizing that those issues.
I can say that in at least one of my terms, not the second one, but in my first term, all issues from one of the board members had to go through the chair. That was how we controlled it with Paul, to try to give a little bit of a gate there, because otherwise he was getting calls from all three of us and kind of doing this, But it's just, our experience, your experience could be very different. Sean, did you want to add anything?
no.
Okay. All right. You're here tonight because the town voted last year to expand the size of the board. 2 years ago, the town hired a town administrator to handle the day-to-day management and to free the Board of Selectmen to become more of a policy setting, all of what we've been talking about. All right, so these changes grew out of the Collins report and the DOR report. What do you see as the next steps in implementing the suggestions of the two reports, and how soon should those happen? Chuck, I'm going to start with you.
Well, the next one is a warrant article that's going to be voted on at the town meeting, which is to approve the consolidation of the finance director and the accountant position. One of the things I was really struck with in the Collins report in particular is that these are some fairly major changes, and the town, like a lot of organizations, is okay with change, but not. The Collins Institute recommendation was to implement these and see how they work. Strengthening the town administrator's role, expanding his authority was accomplished a couple of years ago. I think additional consolidation is possible in the finance department, but I firmly believe that we need to implement the first two pieces first. So we're heading down that path, and hopefully town meeting will approve the consolidation of the finance director and accountant position.
Okay. Sean?
I got to go back to the equipment and facilities management.
Okay.
Long-term asset and facilities planning is somewhat non-existent in this town. And it's cyclical. We went the late 90s, most of the people in this room will remember, 97 to almost 99, we had gone 15 years without doing any facilities at all. We added on to the school, we added on to the fire station so we could remodel this building, so we could build a police station. We crammed everything into 3 or 4 years,
We did that.
and it's coming back. And it wasn't well planned out 8 to 10 years ahead of that. So if I have a quick example. I was on the second half of the CM&D garage building committee. And this isn't a shot at Mark, but he was chair of advisory. And we're in the last meeting to get their approval before town meeting. And the question came up, why do you need such a big building? And our answer was, this is the equipment that we have to fit in it, and the engineers studied it, and this is how big the building has to be to fit that equipment. Mark's question was, how do you know you need all that equipment? My answer was, you're on advisory. We were just here to build a building. A couple years later, the Collins report comes back, and they did cite one of the downfalls of the charge of advisory is they're really not involved in long-term planning in that function. So who is?
And your answer would be,
Nobody.
who should it be?
Well, the selectmen can certainly help to champion that.
Okay,
It's not in a vacuum, just the selectmen, but they certainly can help.
okay.
I think advisory probably needs to take a broader role at that, but that would take some longer-term changes.
Aren't any of you coming up with questions out there? I'm really not seeing anybody scribbling questions. I have questions. Go ahead.
I think we answered them.
Mark?
If you have questions, write them on the paper, that Kitty has, pass them down back to Kitty, and she'll bring them up to here, and we'll go through them and then present them.
Okay, Mark, you get to comment on this.
On the question,
Well,
or?
if you had
on the-
anything to add. Okay,
Well,
I think you've got
let me
both.
talk about advisory for a second, since it's near and dear to me. I don't think that I've heard this before, and I don't think advisory really is the place for that should be responsible for long-term strategic planning. I think it can certainly be a resource, but I don't. They're not elected, and I think for that reason. And it's something that we always fought against on advisory was, not overstepping our bounds and recognizing that we're not elected, we're appointed, and there should be, a limit to what we can do. So I think they can certainly be a resource to that, but it's got to come from this table.
And so that's the thinking that you take into this position,
Yes,
that it needs this needs to come from the Board of Selectmen.
absolutely. With regards to the Collins report and the DOR, I mean, if you read through it, from my perspective, I don't think there's really anything that I can argue with in terms of, I think, the things that they've laid out, the changes that that they're recommending are ones that we want to make. I think what the problem is that the benefits of making those changes might be outweighed by some of the counterproductivity in how we've gone about trying to implement them. And I think that we now have an opportunity as a 5-member board to maybe take a step back, look at some of those things, and take a fresh approach to them.
Is there any detail that you can give me?
Well, it's primarily around the question of moving positions from elected to appointed and doing consolidations of positions and things like that.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Hearing none. Okay, the state of downtown. This has been a perennial for Holliston as well. Yes, you want us to talk about studies that date back to, 1968, blah, blah, blah. The state of downtown is a perennial complaint among residents, but repeated attempts to bring about change down there have met with resistance from one group or another for various reasons. What do you see as possible remedy for downtown, and how would you try to sell that remedy to folks who might oppose it? I'm going to offer you the opportunity. Who wants to go first? You want to go first, John? No? No? Okay.
I think Chuck does.
No,
He seemed pretty excited about it earlier.
You think he's excited?
You want me to go?
I'm happy to go first if that's...
No, go ahead.
When you read these 1975, 1985 reports, it really is fascinating. There was some really good thinking and really good proposals that get repeated 10 years later, that get repeated in the master plans. And in terms of your question, in terms of how to sell it, I think that the Abbey Road and Maple Street projects offer examples. The Maple Street project had a number of problems. It met the basic elements for an elderly affordable to get to the town. Town had approved that warrant article, it had amended it, but it had real problems. I don't know, I thought I saw Tom Ermston in the audience. I thought Tom's description of the town meeting was just perfect, which is, it's not a great project, it has some problems. Abbey Road, on the other hand, is a project that was extraordinarily well planned and sold, to use your terminology, beforehand. And I think the right projects can be sold and will sell themselves. I think there's a recognition that the tax base is a problem and that doing something about downtown is a problem. I did disagree with you. I like the Holliston Superette a lot, and I like your downtown a lot.
I do
so,
I don't think
But-
she said anything about
Yeah.
that.
Well, you know, it's
There are
just-
some people who disagree with us.
and my kids have all loved this, so that's.
Absolutely.
I think a more viable and a larger commercial base in downtown would be very helpful. I would love to see the equivalent of a Dover Market here. So that is something that I think that the Board of Selectmen can focus on. The Planning Board has, and the committee that Mark's serving on is certainly focusing on that as well.
Okay. Sean?
I grew up here, so I've lived those reports, and nothing's changed. It looks exactly the same. When we're done, if we ever get downtown done, it's not going to make a hill of beans difference to the tax rate. There'll never be enough commercial to make a difference. It will, although, help with Mark's comment of, I don't know, where to use the bathroom and grab a beer. But that would draw, and then that in turn will help increase some of the real estate values. But this town's really good at voting things down. If this committee can do anything, it might be help sell a project once in a while. Abbey Road sold itself, but it's not done yet either. He might just go bankrupt before he gets started. Who knows? I will say that I think if that was an out-of-town developer, he'd be gone right now. He would not have known how to navigate this town, because I live here and I don't know how to navigate it. It's difficult, it's a challenge, and it costs too much money.
Okay.
So that's why the best plans aren't going to sell anything, because we're not paying for it. We need someone to come in and pay for it. In other words, the project needs to be financially viable, and good
Right.
luck with that. So we need to help sell it if we get it, and town water and sewer is the only thing that's ever going to really solve anything in this town.
Somebody said it out loud. Okay, Mark.
All right, well, Lanny and I were chatting before this got started, and, sort of trying out a couple of my thoughts here on him, and he said, so you're pro-development? And I said, well, I don't know if I'd say it that way. I guess the answer would be yes, but the kind of development that I believe is important for the town is I don't think we're going to be able to, and if you do the math, putting in water and sewer will probably never pay for itself. We're never going to put enough commercial a business downtown that would then generate enough tax income. So to me, that's not the objective. The objective of improving the downtown is to make us a more welcoming place, a place that people enjoy being in, and serves to raise the value of our housing and creates more of a community. And again, beyond the bathrooms, people have talked about creating another green in town as a place for people to get together. Grace has been part of some of those discussions, and I would certainly welcome the opportunity to put in more sidewalks. So again, I think there's some reasonably inexpensive things we can do that would make a big difference without having to go all the way to water and sewer. At least in the 2 years that I've got.
You put finite on that one. All right, I see that a question has made its way to the front of the room. And we'll do this question, and then I think we'll move on. Okay. All right, this is a statement and then asking for reaction. Town water and sewer is what we need. Reaction.
You just did.
I just said it.
You said
Yeah, I
it.
was going to say, I think
All right,
the numbers, it's hard. We always have a problem with the base being pretty small. The numbers are pretty expensive. It's hard. I think Mark's right. It's hard to justify it. On the other hand, if you want a more viable and vibrant downtown, it may be what you need to do. So I don't disagree with anything Mark said about the making the town more attractive to particularly new families moving in. Sherborn is aging. The school population is
Sure.
down.
Yeah.
Not that different from a number of other towns.
a couple of years ago, do you want all three of us to react to that?
Yeah, do I see another question being written? I just want to verify. Okay. I don't want to take too much more time with selectmen, not because I'm not loving our conversation. I could probably sit here and talk to you all night, but we do have other folks that we need to address. So go ahead, Sean.
I'll make it quick. Several years ago, that question was posed in a survey that went out to all the residents in town. And it was stated pretty simply as, do you support a water district, a downtown water district? And the resounding answer was no. Because people related that to, that's going to cost me money and I'm paying money for the businesses downtown.
Actually, I think it had two questions. One was just general proposition, and then the other, which had more support, and then another one which suggested a percentage raise in the cost.
Right,
And
the
that
cost.
and that did not do well.
So what was not explained well to the residents before they answered the question was, do you understand how much of that water is Sherborn's? I think it was 68 or 72% is, by Title V, Sherborn-related water. In other words, we already pay for that. It's not business, it's the school, it's Woodhaven. We're sitting in the building that has one well that feeds all the town buildings that's next to the parking lot. It costs us money now. We don't have support, but we're paying for it. So that's goes back to the planning.
Okay, well, you guys are going to have to do your arguing about that one in the future. I can tell it's,
That we will.
I see it's in the future, you know, but anyway. What else besides a green can we put downtown to make it, as you've described it, more attractive that wouldn't need water or sewer? And this is going to be the last question, and we're going to ask the Board of Health to come up.
Fix the tennis courts.
Okay? And you've talked about bathrooms.
No, I think the skating rink was fantastic. So that, that's I think a great example of the kinds of things that we can do.
You want to say that into the mic? I just want to
Sorry,
make sure.
I was just mentioning, Sean, I think the skating rink was a fantastic thing to do. Brought some life down there. It was obviously something people enjoyed and probably didn't cost a ton of money. So I think that's a perfect example of the kind of thing we want to do. But we also need to obviously maintain the things we have. The tennis courts, to my mind, are an embarrassment and not a selling point. If you bring a friend in to play a game of tennis, we want to put our best foot forward. And again, it's not going to break the bank to fix the tennis courts.
Okay, Chuck?
When we were brainstorming on the planning board, there was a couple of really interesting ideas. One is to close off, make this more of a town center, particularly with the Council of Aging building and the and Leland and Abbey Road. It really could be. I was really struck when we first moved to Sherborn. Natick was getting some mall money, but downtown Natick was not in great shape. That central common and that gazebo really was the anchor for it, and it's an interesting thought. And you could combine it with a group of students from Northeastern was looking at the intersection here at Maple and Washington, which is the second most dangerous in town, and they suggested rerouting traffic around town hall. So that's, to me, that's a very interesting idea.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to Sean, just to, anything? Make downtown more attractive without water, sewer? Maybe not. Not so much.
Fix the facilities. The
Okay,
tennis
keep those-
court, the playground.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, gentlemen, very much. I thought you did a great job.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yep. Okay. Okay. Is there a particular place for graphics purposes on the television that
Go ahead.
I know, but I don't care.
Just sit there in the end.
You know, if they put my name in front of you, that's fine. I have no idea.
Go ahead.
You want us to switch?
That's fine. We'll make it work. Somewhere in the editing room, they will switch the names, that's all.
You gotta move.
All right, I have something coming to me. Please tell the candidates to talk to the audience, not the moderator. Good point. Good point. You are on television, and that's really what you've got to remember, is talking to that microphone. Anyway, okay, so, Board of Health, we have some similar questions, but not exactly the same, and we will start out of courtesy here, we'll start with Rebecca. Okay, so, what was it that made you decide to run for this office, and what do you see as your most positive asset that you bring to the new position?
I am a physician, and I have lived in Sherborn for almost 20 years. I have developed a great commitment to the town during that time period, and I've always been interested in public health, starting in high school, increasing over the years in my practice of medicine, and initially when I worked in Haiti in a tuberculosis hospital, and in Mexico in a rural village where we were actually involved with community hygiene, septic related questions and issues, immunizations, and public health teaching and fluoride treatment, etc. So it's very interesting, and over the years I have only increased my experience and knowledge in public health related issues, and I find myself now, as my children getting older, I have a little more time, and I thought it'd be fun and interesting to be more involved with the town. Go ahead.
If you have anything, go ahead, keep going. And what do you think is the most positive asset? Do you think it's your medical experience?
Assets that I bring. Well, obviously my interest and my experience and knowledge are an asset. I think I bring some professionalism as well as an ability to work with people. I enjoy helping people a lot, and I think it would be fun and challenging to be able to work with people to help them to achieve their goals. I was not aware until the questions came out, actually. Believe it or not, you can call me naive. I didn't realize that it was a controversial position, but that's mostly because I've been so busy that I haven't been paying attention to town activities and politics. But I would say that perhaps one of the biggest assets I could bring is a fresh face if there's been controversy in the past.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
Well, the primary reason I chose to continue is that, and you may not know this, but the board has just recently undertaken to look at a total structural reorganization of the board, basically looking at different organizational models to use to achieve the work of the board. And those models have two aims. One is to obviously cost less, but the other is actually to be far more responsive to the citizens, to provide more sort of citizen access and make the staff more available to the citizens. So we're just undertaking that. We're just starting to undertake that. We have 5 different models that we're studying, and as many of you know, I've got over 20 years experience on the Board of Health, and that experience is really going to drive a lot of our decisions, because I'm obviously intimately familiar with the workings of the board and what's going to have to go into this model to make it work. I'm confident that we actually will come up with a better working model, that we will have a model that does provide more agent access to the town, that's more user-friendly, and will cost less. So that was my primary reason for wanting to go. The other is that I think right now we have a tremendous variety on the board, which is essential to the board. We have a range of talents on the board that are somewhat unmatched in recent history on the board. I am myself a registered professional civil engineer. Dr. Chris Quinn is a practicing physician, and he happens to also be the president of the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards. And Daryl Beardsley is an environmental engineer scientist. She does consulting work actually around the world. You wouldn't believe the range of discussions we have when we're trying to reach a consensus, but the fact is it's a valuable discussion and tremendously valuable to have that range of experiences and ability on the board all at the same time. I think that's about it.
Okay, nice, thank you. The Board of Health, as Rebecca referenced, has been quite controversial over the years, with some builders and septic water professionals refusing to do business with the town. We hear that in Holliston, too. Why is this? Should something be done about it? And if so, what? And we'll start with you, Peter, please.
Well, certainly can't deny that that is the case, and Mary states it quite well. I would tell you that the Board of Health is essentially the health police. Now, if you think of that and relate us to the police force, there are similar aspects. We are a regulatory board. We're not an opinion-forming board. We're a board that has a whole bunch of rules and regulations, both state and local, that we're obliged by law, we swear, to uphold and enforce. That is not always popular. But that said, I also firmly believe that when you're working with regulations, you can look at those regulations in two ways. You can either look at those regulations in a manner in which you're going to find a way to stop something, or you can look at those regulations in a manner in which you're going to try to find a way to achieve something. And I will tell you that the board is of late is certainly leaning toward achieving. We have recently moderated one of the primary aspects of the board, the perk rate, which we changed last year from 20 minutes to 40 minutes. But we are also looking at other ways to make the regulations more user-friendly and still enforce the law and still protect the public health. We have water and sewer right on the same properties. You know, that's really not common in Massachusetts. Most towns at least have a water system, so the sewer isn't going to impact your well, but you don't have that luxury here. And so that balance is very, very delicate balance. The regulations are stringent because of that. And when we go to change those regulations, that is our primary purpose, is to maintain that protection and that stringent separation and that delicate balance. It absolutely is essential that we do that. So we will look for opportunities to, make it more user-friendly, but at the same time, we are absolutely protecting the public health.
Okay, Rebecca, you got the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Board of Health is about health, and I think that we must always keep our eye on the common goal. Honestly, there shouldn't be controversy on the board because everyone in the town should have the same goal, which is to maximize the benefit. Everyone has the same goals, so everyone is benefiting when we follow the policies that have been established over time. It is true that from time to time we need to reevaluate the policies that we're using, and obviously we need to learn from experience and we need to have evidence-based analysis when we make those decisions. So I don't see this as a political appointment. I see this as a scientific and intellectual academic position. And I think I have the background and the experience and the knowledge to be able to make intelligent decisions. But we have to remember that the Board of Health is about health. And I think probably one of the most important thing that I can bring to the table is that I have no conflicts of interest whatsoever. I'm just a scientist who's interested in helping to promote the principles of public health in the town.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, but do you believe there are conflicts of interest on the board?
Excuse me.
She referred to conflicts of interest. I've heard that
Okay.
attack on myself in the past, and if there's allusions to that, I'd like to answer it.
Let me look to some direction from the committee in charge here, because I don't know how far down. Well, I don't see any, so if you can be succinct. I don't know if you meant this. I should back up with it. Was this meant as specific to Peter or just in some general observation?
I am a physician and a scientist, and I like to work together with people to achieve a goal without taking risks of threatening the water table or the public health. I was unaware of controversies, but it is true that since in the last few weeks since I decided to run, it has been suggested that there might be some conflicts of interest, and all I'm saying is that I personally have no I have no experience with the Board of Health, but I personally have no conflicts of interest.
Okay, Peter, I will let you take a minute there.
Okay. The most often conflict of interest that's thrown at me is that I happen to be a realtor as well as a registered professional engineer. And you should all know that I very carefully excuse myself from any Board of Health activity that involves anything to do with real estate. I've talked to the State Ethics Commission. I have conducted myself over the years, many years, in total agreement with their direction and their opinions that I've sought on a number of occasions. There is no conflict of interest on the Board of Health. There certainly is no conflict between the members of the board, and I personally take great pains to assure that there is no conflict on my part. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Some people feel that technology in dealing with septage has progressed much faster than the town's regulations. Is this true? Peter, you've probably, I'm going to start with you. Or did I start with you last time? I did, didn't I? No, okay, then I should go back to you, Rebecca. I'm sorry.
As many of us know, sometimes things can be very complicated. And this is this area of public health where below the surface, it's more complex than it might appear at first. And also, the more we know, the more complicated things become. It is definitely true that some of the new methods that are being used and septic systems that are being designed are more efficient at removing nitrogen and other toxic substances that are of concern. Unfortunately, it's also becoming more complex because we are learning that there are other substances which are present in septage and sewage. For example, metabolites of drugs like chemotherapy agents and opiates, patients, as well as infectious agents like hepatitis. And, we aren't looking for it, but, for the same reason that hepatitis is a concern, we might even be worried about other viruses like HIV. It's very, very important that we remember the big picture, which is that we have to remember that the water table is very delicate, and we have to look out for the public health whenever we make decisions. So, but it's definitely true that sometimes it's worth examining current procedures, and sometimes it's possible to make changes that are beneficial, and some systems are improved. So I think that this is an issue that requires understanding and knowledge of some of the complexities and the ability to work in a very thorough method of reviewing the science and making decisions which are evidence-based to minimize risks and benefits.
Okay. We're getting a lineup of questions here, guys. Okay, Peter.
I would tend to agree with what Rebecca has to say as to the scientific things that we're learning, but as regarding the technological changes, the state is really taking the lead in recognizing new ways to treat septic and new septic regulations and allowing new technologies for septic. And they are actually taking a fairly slow approach at it. They've been doing this since the 1990s in allowing modest changes and modest improvements to how septic is treated, as opposed to the old way where you dump it in a tank, hope everything works, and put it in a leaching field. So yes, there are new technologies. Interestingly enough, the Board of Health, under state regulations, allows these new technologies when you're repairing your home system. And in fact, they're pretty much routinely allowed for repair systems by regulation and so forth. We're almost obliged to recognize the state's progress and experience with these to allow them. The change comes in whether or not these are going to be allowed for new construction, and that would possibly change the landscape. And there we have an opportunity to, as Rebecca says, start really doing more scientific research along with the technological advances and looking at our own regulations and the impact. And I can't agree more that this is something that is carefully considered and carefully done. But I believe it should be carefully studied and carefully done.
Okay, thank you. The last official question, and then we have several here that we'll see if we can get in. What other public health issues besides septic issues should the Sherborn Board of Health be addressing? Peter, can we start with you on this one?
Well, the next biggest thing after septic is wells. You just heard me allude to the fact that your wells and your septic are sitting on the same property, sometimes not very far apart, or at least not very far apart horizontally. You also may not know that the vast majority of your wells are rock-drilled wells, and some of those are, 200, 300 feet deep. So you have a lot more vertical separation than horizontal. But the fact is that wells are our second biggest concern. But your well is a private well, and not to lecture, but the Board of Health only regulates brand-new wells. We regulate wells. We make sure that when they go in according to all the state regulations, all the town regulations, and then we make sure that the quality is there and the quantity is there, and we tell everybody, okay, you've got a really good well, please take care of it, and now it's your private well. The only exception to that are the semi-public and public water supplies, and they're all regulated by the state, and they all have testing requirements, as any of you might know the church's requirements for testing and the town office's requirement for testing and so forth. But the other big thing that the Board of Health is lately involved in, and actually ever since 9/11, is emergency preparedness. This is a huge load on the Board of Health. Since 9/11, we are part of Region 4A of a state-mandated and federally supported emergency preparedness program. It requires that we have a medical reserve corps, which actually I know people in this room serve on that medical reserve corps, and people in this room train for that medical reserve corps. They're in place to staff and organize emergency response centers in the event of an epidemic, a major emergency, a major catastrophe. So getting ready for that is a little known but a fairly expensive and time-consuming aspect of the Board of Health. So basically, if you ask me what other than septic, I'd have to say wells and emergency preparedness.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Rebecca?
The list is very long. I think the Board of Health is about a lot more than just septic systems, unfortunately. My personal feeling is that we need to pay attention to the emerging infection crisis of Lyme disease and tick-borne diseases. Unfortunately, Sherborn, as many of you know, has almost 7 times the national average of Lyme disease, and as recently as, it's amazing because it's almost 7 years ago, we had double the rate of Nantucket, which people think of as having one of the highest incidences of Lyme. So I think that that is something that I'm personally interested in. But another area that I think will probably be extremely important is just public education. In the recent few weeks since I decided that maybe this was a good time for me to run for the Board of Health, it seemed that most of the controversy seems to be regarding the whole discussion of Title V and septics and wells, and I think it would be important for people to understand how that relates to them. What is it that we care about? What do we need to think about? And is there anything we can do? Apparently, right in Framingham on the Sherborn border is the largest toxic waste site in Massachusetts, according to the DEP, and from a company called General Chemical. And as in 2012, several wells in Sherborn tested positive for contaminants that were probably leaching through the soil from that particular site, and that's just the tip of the iceberg because the plume is headed in our direction. So there are some issues that I know the board is paying attention to, and I think we need to continue to pay attention to those, but I think probably the most important thing that the board needs to perhaps increase is some education about what it means to live in a town where we all have our own water supply. We're often compared with our neighbors, and it's true that we have I think we have very stringent controls over the rules for construction and new construction, et cetera, and these are things that Mr. Lipton alluded to. But it's also unusual to live somewhere where you actually drink the groundwater. And that's a very important thing to consider, and that's something that I think we kind of take for granted, that when the water comes out of the tap, we don't really wonder where it came from. And so these sort of inconvenient things that we have to deal with definitely have the potential to affect our quality of life.
There are some questions that were done specifically to each of you. I'm going to set those aside for the moment. There were two that were done in generic, and I do want to raise these. One was, given the fact that water and sewer are on property, is there a way to reduce the approval cycle for septic work and sewer system replacements? I think it's just the timing. Is there anything that you can deal with water and sewer more expeditiously? Yes, getting all the permits and stuff. I don't know if
Yeah, well, I haven't been on the board, so obviously, so I'm not able to really comment, but I would ask,
Well, yeah,
defer to you.
let's treat it as a point of information as opposed to...
Yeah.
But it is pretty much set by a calendar of events, and unfortunately, the way it works is like a lot of processes in the town, they're sequential rather than simultaneous. So the simple answer is, yes, there would be ways that it could be slightly improved, but every department has their own province, if you will, and we cannot act until we get a determination from the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission not date or act until they get an application from the applicant. And frankly, a lot of the applicants don't understand or appreciate, what that sequence is. And the biggest burden is that we are a town of volunteer boards, all not meeting frequently, and so the decisions by each board are not fast. I mean, they just don't happen. The Board of Health meets twice, maybe 3 times a month. Conservation, about the same. And so when you're looking for sequential some answers on projects, they don't come quickly, all right? It's just the nature of the beast. And sometimes, there's site investigation that's required. So is there opportunity to streamline it? Not an awful lot, but could it be more coordinated? There is an awful lot of coordination going on in the office right now between Conservation, Building Inspector, and the Board of Health all meeting in the same room, and so they do a lot of that. They try to streamline it as much as possible.
Okay. Not sure. I think I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to do one. Rebecca, I don't know if you have anything to add. I think you have addressed some of this. Besides public health, what is your experience with wells and septic systems? I think you've talked about that. How will you address the regulations? And I'm assuming somebody is asking in terms of, use of them.
Clearly, the area where I have the least experience is the regulations for this, because I've been a practicing physician and, clinical instructor, Harvard Medical School, whatever, but I'm certainly not talking about wells. So I would do my best to become educated and follow the rules or reevaluate them if I think it's necessary to reevaluate them. But I honestly, I'm not really able right now to say more than that I would do my best to work with the people who, to help people accomplish their goal without taking risks of the overall public health.
All right, the next one is obviously a political concern. I'm going to allow it because I do think it's the kind of thing that can get in the way in a campaign, but this is for Peter. There was a criticism a while ago of how the Board of Health agent was compensated. His pay was not directly related to his time, the time spent on individual jobs. Could you explain how he is paid and how it relates to a specific job he is overseeing?
Sure. The Board of Health agent, in the past, the procedures were less than rigorous, and now I can tell you that they're totally rigorous. The Board of Health agent is a contractor to the Board of Health. He submits I believe, every 2-week invoice to the town for the work he does. That invoice includes the dates that he worked, the hours that he worked, and the projects that he worked on those days. Every invoice is reviewed by the board chair, myself at this time, and by the board administrator before being put on the warrant and sent to the accounting office for payment. It is rigorously reviewed, and it is matched to the projects that are currently underway and needing attention. What you've probably heard about is that in the past, this was far less rigorous, it was far less carefully done, and a lot of that was just due to the way the counting system worked in town and the urgencies of getting warrants in at this time before that could happen. And all of that's been corrected, and I can only tell you now that every hour and every dollar is accounted for.
Okay. There's a two-part question for Rebecca, but I'm only going to ask the second part. How much do you know about state and town of Sherborn health laws? And the reason I'm asking this question is it is distinct from just being septic and
I know that the health laws are at multiple levels, so some are federal, some are state, municipal, and then each community is given the opportunity to sort of fine-tune those regulations to meet certain circumstances. It can be really complicated. As a physician, I'm required to be familiar with many of the state health, public health-related regulations. For example, reportable diseases and communicable diseases I'm very familiar with, unfortunately. Regarding Sherborn, obviously I have some homework to do. I don't know the regulations. I don't know the things that are beyond the scope of my, family and those needs that I have because I haven't been on the committee, but I obviously would become, very familiar quickly. But, obviously in medicine, every patient requires research and analysis of data and laboratory values and, the ability to sort of take scientific evidence-based analysis and come to a conclusion that is the best for every given situation, depending on the circumstances of the situation. In Sherborn, I think the biggest challenges, and maybe this question is specifically related to questions regarding wells and septic systems in Title V, and in those circumstances, sometimes complexities arise that have to do with the type of soil or where something is situated and the proximity to the wetlands, and obviously each circumstance needs to be dealt with individually.
Okay,
I
thank
don't know
you.
if I answered the question, but
Okay. I think we're all set then, folks.
I'd like to just one final thing, because I've participated in things of this sort in the past, and I've heard people make alarming circumstances that I feel should be corrected. And Rebecca alluded to the plume at General Chemical as growing, and the Board of Health is very, very carefully following that. And it's actually under state and federal control, and Framingham, in fact, is in lead with this and watching it far more carefully than anyone, and with great concern. But her statement that the contaminants of General Chemical were found in the wells in Sherborn, I do not believe that it's accurate that they were found, the same chemicals that were found in the Sherborn wells. The Sherborn wells in that area were tested, but the contaminants were not the same as coming from General Chemical, and I've not heard anything about the plume growing.
I did not say that the plume is growing. The plume is heading in this direction.
Well, then,
I have no way of saying that plume is growing. What I understand from the reading that I've done is that there are some chemicals and there were 3 or 4 wells on Prospect Street or something like that, where some contaminants were identified. I'm not an expert in this. I'm only reporting what I learned in my research. I know, and what I understand is that the town of Framingham is sort of on top of things, but the General Chemical hasn't actually done anything yet. So we do need to pay attention to it.
we are certainly paying attention to it.
Yeah,
We
I'm not saying we're not.
totally in agreement. We are certainly
Yeah,
paying attention to it.
And my impression is that Framingham is very concerned, and so they've been very proactive. So
They have.
luckily.
And the Board of Health, Roger Demler is actually following this on behalf of the Board of Health and reporting to us regularly, and we get updates, as you may know, regularly from Framingham, the state, and everybody else under the sun. We know what's happening.
Okay, thank you both very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
We have our person for the planning board.
Thank you, Peter.
Oops, glasses and other
On the
things.
agenda was the treasurer. Heather Peck called me over the weekend, and she
had to relocate from her house because of the damage done during the winter storm, not living in that field with her family, and she just could not be over here. So she apologizes. I wish she could be here, but she wanted to see her. Okay,
Yeah, for the television audience, you really need to speak into a mic.
all right.
Speaking, no? Yes, you need
All
to.
right, but we do have Joseph H. Putnam, otherwise known as Poe, who is a candidate for the planning board. Well, you've been on the planning board in the past, right?
Yep.
So can you sit in the first chair there, why don't you?
All right,
And we have some questions for you. Thank you.
okay.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. So you've been on the planning board? Are you still, are you on the planning board now?
This
This is a comeback? Okay, this is a comeback. That's great. What was it that made you decide to run now? And what do you see as the most positive asset that you bring to this position?
Well, first of all, to be really frank, I'm running because I got asked to. But, when I was asked, I remembered how much I enjoyed it and how interesting it was. So I'm glad to be doing it. And because I'm running unopposed, unless someone has filed papers I haven't heard about, I'm going to be as quick with all this as I can. But I'm sure, people have questions for me, so. It's a very interesting job, and I'm an architect. And so as far as what I bring to this job, positive aspects, I've lived in Sherborn for just shy of 30 years. I've been a practicing architect for 40, and so I practice a lot of planning, site planning, architecture, interior design, and I also happen to be very interested in New England and New England villages and preserving New England's character as a whole. So it's a very, very interesting place for me to be. And as soon as they asked me, I realized I should have done it a long time ago, come back to the board.
Okay. It's a long question, but it's one that I'm sure you have thoughts on. Sherborn as a community has not grown over the past 20 years, yet costs have gone up faster than inflation, putting the town in a tight financial position. It is primarily residential in its tax base. As a member of the planning board, what role and actions do you support to change the town center? And please be specific regarding the possible advantages of such changes. And how should the planning board deal with this situation, given that the residential property taxes are second highest in the state, and we're complaining about the same things over in Holliston? So,
Okay. First of all, having practiced architecture for many, many years, when people design buildings, they have to follow the building code. So when I look at the role of the planning board, strictly speaking, the role of the planning board, in my opinion, is to follow the law. And it's very clear what's allowed, what's not allowed. And so, and also we have to have an even hand. So we just have to interpret what the zoning code says. So that's what I see the role on the planning board, to follow the regulations. And even though it's called the planning board, it's not really a strategic planning position, in my opinion. It's not that I'm not interested in that, but I feel that that really belongs to the selectmen. They need to set the policy, and then, we can help them and advise and be a resource. That being said, I do have a lot of opinions, things that are important to me, and probably the most important thing is to preserve the rural character of Sherborn. I mean, that's why I've lived here all those years. I really like it. But I also like New England villages, and so some of the things that I think are possible and directions that can be thought about is the downtown. And I'm also interested, again, this is as a suggestion, not, the planning board that doesn't make policy, we might have ideas. And I'm interested in cottage industries. I mean, we used to have cottage industries here. If you go a come in downstairs, you can look at these beautiful displays. We had a lot of cottage industries. And so as a revenue base, a tax possible, I think it's worth thinking about either low impact or really no impact occupations and things like chair making, caning. Again, I haven't thought too much about this until I saw this question, but I think there are things that would be absolutely prohibited in the code now that if we ask the question differently, we might say, what a good idea.
Can I ask you a question? I'm going to put in the charge of the planning board, you have said that the laws are what you are enforcing or you're interpreting, and where in that do you allow for the fact that the planning board is also the board that's in charge of master plans?
Well, I guess the way I think of it like an architect, and we architects like to think that, we make all the decisions about the buildings, but in fact, our clients make the decisions and we bring them into being. So that's how I see the role of the planning board. In other words, I think the direction needs to be set, by the town as a whole through the selectmen. The selectmen, again, this is my personal opinion, I'm not trying to tell the selectmen what to do, but then if the selectmen say, okay, we need you to think about this, look, I'd be happy to, redo a master plan, but I just don't see that as, I see us as a resource board, not as a decision maker. That's, how I see it. I'm happy to, set strategic plans, but I think that's not how I see it.
Okay.
I'm willing to change. I like design.
All right.
I'm also interested in in-law dwellings, in-law apartments. I think that Sherborn has an extremely restrictive regulations now, which I will enforce. However, aging in place, I think is a good way to go. I think, the nuclear families they're good. We want to preserve the good aspects, but still having secondary dwellings in very large, very expensive houses is something to think about, in my opinion. I'm also interested in expanding agricultural use. I think we need more local agriculture. I also think renting our space to utility companies like playing fields, parking lots, railroad cuttings. I mean, solar voltaics is coming now, and it's a possible revenue source. Again, in terms of developing revenue, it's worth thinking about.
Excuse me, Mr. President, we do have a question from the audience.
Okay.
And I think we've, and it follows up on what I asked too. What do you see as the planning board's role in designing a master plan?
I guess to provide ideas, to provide direction, to provide resources, to do research, to make suggestions. I've not thought of it as a master planning position, but maybe I need to, maybe I haven't been on the board. Maybe it's been so long since I've been on the board, I should know better, but I'm in favor of doing it. It's just I didn't think that was its role.
Maybe it was added after you departed.
Maybe
Seriously,
it was.
but it definitely.
I've done a lot of master planning.
It's a big feature. I used to head up the Division of Community Services in Boston, and we supervised all master plans and that kind of stuff. And it's a big part of what planning boards are, quote, expected or charged with doing. But that may have been after your time. The planning board recommends changes to the bylaws. What bylaws do you think might be changed? You mentioned the in-law apartments as a possibility. Is there something else?
Okay, I have to plead not having been on the board in a long time. So maybe the best way I can answer this question is to say that my interest is in preserving New England character, preserving rural character, but also, for instance, in the downtown, the center of the town, there are many, many beautiful, beautiful cities and towns in New England, in England, that have fairly dense layout. And to me, the issue is not so much the setbacks, which is, a classic thing which planning boards administer, as the overall visual character and how it functions. So, one of my favorite places is Cambridge, England, where you look one way and you see the best bookstore in the world, and you look the other way and you see cows. And as planning and zoning has developed in the United States, it has become a very legalistic process. And I would like to see a more, at least the way I think, a more visual approach, and using tried and true examples that have been very successful in New England for 300 years.
This is going to be the last question, and I'm going to ask you to answer it within a couple of minutes, because I'm ticking past my deadline.
Well, we have to get you back to Holliston.
Well, you do. It's a long ride back there. The planning board should enforce the zoning rules, but who should establish who should establish new rules and change existing rules to support those changes?
Well, I think it's the planning board. My understanding is we have the authority to amend those rules. The zoning codes come from the state. There's model zoning codes, and I'm sure ours is based on a model one. But I think that should originate in the planning board. And my problem would be having too many ideas.
Okay. I know that problem. Thank you. Thank you all very much for allowing me to be here. Frank, stand up and bring your meeting to closure, but please remember to use the microphone or they can't hear you on the TV. Thanks, Mr. Putnam. The trick about being televised is to remember to use the mic.
I not only want to
Whoops.
thank Mary for spending this time with us and doing all the homework in preparation for it,
you.
but I also like to thank Pat Cassell.
Yeah, she's
Pat?
tucked in there. Wave to the people. There
Thank you,
we go.
Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, our screeners,
Thank you.
George, Doug, and Kitty. And thank you all for
Sweat.
joining us here this evening. And for those of you at home are watching, thank you for watching. But the last thing I'd like to do, Mary, is to give you this flower.
Oh, the plant that we kept moving around from pillar to post.
We didn't know what to do with it, so we're going to give it to you.
I thought it was nice that you had a plant for the evening. That's nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.